Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation we're having on the topic of decentralized central planning. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, decentralized and central. So we'll unpack that as we go. Um, and what kind of planning? Planetary planning. And it feels to me like humanity has gone so far into the extreme of separation, separation, separation that um, even to bring up this idea of a central plan for the planet, whether centralized or decentralized, a central plan for the planet. When I say it, even when I'm listening to my own words, it sounds like something from outer space, from another planet, right? From another civilization, from some like advanced civilization somewhere that does central planning. It's almost like, oh, we couldn't do that here, right? Do you notice that when you hear this idea of central planning for the planet, doesn't it just seem so foreign, right? Because we have gone so far off the deep end of being fragmented and there not being a central plan for the planet. I would say maybe the closest things lately would be, the United Nations and the COP meetings, on climate. Those are the closest things, but even they don't really come close at all, right? Um, yeah, they're talking about things at a planetary scale and they're trying to get agreements done, but that's just regarding carbon emissions. It's not even regarding the whole of the planet and all the myriad facets and aspects. So anyway, I'd love to hear people's comments on that before we go further and screen share this article.
Well, they're also facades. The COP and all these G20 meetings, they're all just facades. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a load of crap, really, to keep the people thinking that they are working to do something for the good. But as we know ourselves, even what they're proposing and the plans that they're proposing for 2030, 2050, these big plans, they're not even plans that are going to do that are going to help anyway, because the time limit is is out. They're wrong with their timing, but they're also wrong with their evaluations of the true problem, or at least they're not being honest about the evaluations of the true problem when they're talking about them, when they're trying to make out to the general public that over here we are governments and we're top people, we're going to fix this or we're going to sort it out. But it's just a facade. It's just to keep people happy and bubbling away and working away, whatever. But there ain't any real plan to deal with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good assessment. I would say that there's one other audience that they're focused on, consciously or subconsciously. So you say it's just a facade to keep the people bubbling away and feeling like they have a plan or whatever. I would say that in addition to the people, right, the citizens of these different countries, another audience they have is themselves, right? Making themselves feel like they're being responsible and they're on top of it. So the facade is not just for their constituents, it's also for themselves, people in government themselves, because they must be experiencing, wait a second, whoa, things are overheating here, too many greenhouse gases, etc. Well, of course we're going to do something about it. Of course we're doing something about it. So I think they're doing it for themselves as well. One could make the same argument about us having these meetings. Oh, we're just, we're trying to make ourselves feel like we're doing something. But, and that's a scary thought. But the reality is we're in a death spiral of exponential planetary overheating and destruction of the biosphere. Sol is here with a tremendous focus on the Amazon. That's of course a crucial part of the biosphere, but it's really all ecosystems that are suffering. So here we are with a bold mission to start with a conversation that we are intending to expand into a whole network of conversations about decentralized central planetary planning. And let me put that in the chat, because that's a bunch of words to unpack. Decentralized central planetary planning. And maybe that's DCPP. Maybe that's too long or too complex of an acronym. I don't know, but I'm just playing with the concepts here. Anyway, again, I invite everyone to just jump in even while I'm talking and screen sharing. And let me go ahead and screen share this article by Umair, one of my favorite writers, contemporary writers. Capitalism is not going to save the planet, us, or life on it. The neoliberal fantasy of the market saving the planet is failing America and the world. And it shows this horrific dystopian image here. Let me go ahead and expand the size of this. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, there we go. James, is that at all readable on your screen? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is now.
Okay. Did it get better in the last few seconds when I made it bigger?
Yeah, when you made it bigger, yeah, the print is grand. Now I can read it. Yes, perfect.
Okay.
No, perfect.
Is that even better still? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anyway, I'll read it out loud, so feel free to close your eyes and just listen or read along as you wish. But here it is. This is from Saturday. Umair writes, I've had a couple of days to think about it now, and I've reached a conclusion which you're not going to like. Well, if you're American and a liberal, that is, it goes like this. Biden's climate plan might sound ambitious, but it's underwhelming because it's in fact not a plan at all. Biden announced, as you know by now, a goal, not a plan, to have, he uses that word a lot. It means cut in half. I just want to make sure I'm clear when I say that, have, not H-A-V-E, H-A-L-V-E, have America's carbon emissions by 2030. That's a great headline. It sounds wonderful. I wish we lived in a world where it could come true. The problem is that it has no chance of happening. Now, I don't like to say any of that. It sounds ugly, but I can't stomach the uncritical attitude that seems to exist regarding the Biden administration. So let's talk about it like adults. Go ahead and get the rage out of your system first if you need to. Why is that? Am I being a cynic, a jerk, committing the ultimate American sin of being negative? You think about it with me and tell me. So here, I'm going to stop screen share for a second and just take a pause. In fact, let me pause recording for a second. All right, so I took a pause from screen sharing Umair's article. I just want to say, he is talking about get the rage out, the frustration that there is no plan. There's just a goal to cut America's carbon emissions in half. And then he wants to get critical about that because there is no plan. As we read along in the article, I just want to express in advance some of my frustration about Umair and his writings, because it sounds like he's all on board with reducing carbon emissions. But when the topic comes to solar radiation management, cooling the planet by reflecting sunlight back into space, he gets negative on that topic. And we'll get to that as we go along. But it seems he's not aware of the good solutions of SRM, namely Dr. Ye Tao's solutions and some of the other solutions that we've actually co-created right here of reflecting sunlight back into space right on the surface of the Earth, he gets critical about these ideas of spraying stuff into the atmosphere, which I'm equally critical of, but he's critical of them for actually different reasons, which are kind of troubling to me. So we'll get to that. The bottom line is, I don't share Umair's views that reducing carbon is where it's at. You know, that, I mean, of course we need to reduce carbon emissions, but we need to do it sensibly and as part of a holistic plan to cool the planet. Because if we just eliminate carbon emissions immediately, particularly the dirtiest emissions that are creating particles which are reflecting sunlight back into space, if we will lose that global dimming in a matter of weeks to months and see a spike in temperatures that we cannot handle, that will probably destroy life on Earth. So not that that's even a possibility at this point, a practical possibility of eliminating emissions, but certainly reducing emissions alone is not the answer. We need a holistic approach that includes solar radiation management. So we'll get to that. I just wanted to get some of my frustrations out with Umair before I continue. So let me continue to screen share, and please jump in with any comments or questions as we go. All right. America has long been the world's highest carbon emitter per capita, at least among large countries. Only Australia recently exceeded it, and among all countries, only tiny Arab nations outdo it. What would it take to really have cut in half America's carbon emissions? You'd have to restructure the entire American economy, not to mention get Americans to change their lifestyles of big cars, big houses, greed, selfishness, and materialism. Good luck with that, champ. But let me ask that another less mean way. How do Biden and his team hope to cut in half carbon emissions? The answer? There is no answer. The invisible hand of the market is supposed to do it. It's the old neoliberal fantasy. We'll subsidize this and we'll offer a tax credit here, and bang, the market will take care of the rest. So the answer in this case goes something like this. We'll announce a huge goal to cut in half carbon emissions. We'll offer a little investment and some incentives, and then the market will work its magic. There's a goal, sure, but there's no plan. You can see that answer through the absence of the other one. Biden hasn't announced, for example, a plan to create an American energy grid or American Clean Energy Agency. Remember how NASA got created to send people to the moon? By the way, this is a great parallel that I like. I mean, could you imagine if Biden were president back then, the moral equivalent of what he's doing now with just announcing a goal is to say, hey, we've got a goal to send people to the moon, but no NASA. No, we need agencies for this. We need plans for this. Or say the idea of a global emergency fund for green energy. I capitalize those for a reason, to frame them as social institutions, like, say, an American healthcare system, which is another thing Biden won't announce, precisely because under neoliberalism, the idea that there should be any kind of collective investment is strictly forbidden. Let me put that to you another way. The Environmental Protection Agency was created in 1970 by Richard Nixon. Meanwhile, the planet's melting down and the Democrats can't create even a single new government institution to do much about it. Precisely because they don't think there should be one. See the problem I'm trying to point out? The only real new institution Biden proposed is a climate corps. That's a good idea, I guess, but a few thousand American kids, I don't know, planting trees aren't going to save the planet. The fact that the only new institution Biden has announced is the Climate Corps is what I mean by absence. There aren't any other ones. And that tells us that the Democrats, neoliberals to the last, are hoping that the private sector is going to magically cut America's carbon emissions in half. Hence, no American energy grid, no American Green Investment Bank, no American Clean Energy Institute or fund, and so on. The Democrats, in other words, are hoping for something like the following. They offer some incentives. The private sector steps in. Venture capital pours into areas like solar and wind and so on, and prices drop and everything's fine. The market is fixed. The market has fixed everything. Yay! The only problem is that all that's already happened. And while renewable energy has grown, that growth is already slowing precisely because the lowest hanging fruit has been picked off. Adding more capacity now means solving the trickier problems. Do we surround whole cities with solar farms? Who is going to pay for that, manage it, maintain it? Do we build entire massive complexes of windmills taking up portions of whole states? And again, who is going to? Who's going to do it? You see the point. And that raises the question that neoliberalism doesn't want to answer. You can see how disastrously the privatization of American power turned out. In states like California and Texas, which were painfully dumb enough to privatize their power grids, who paid the price? Well, consumers did, quite literally. Prices skyrocketed while investment stagnated. What else would you expect to happen? If you were a money-grubbing capitalist bastard and you owned a power grid, that's exactly what you'd do too. Jack up prices and starve investment. That's exactly why power grids are a key asset prized by oligarchs all over the world. They're a massive, massive cash cow. The result in America has been disastrous. The grid is badly, badly obsolete, and yet people pay through the nose for it. Now imagine that we're asking the same companies with the same incentives to go out there and build a whole new power system for the country. Not just electricity, in fact, but everything that uses oil and gas. Meanwhile, the profitability of renewables is already dropping. What exactly do you think the private sector is going to do? The answer to that question, it's going to waffle. It's going to say it's going to do the right thing, and maybe plenty of people working in and managing those companies are going to want to do the right thing. And maybe even Wall Street is going to, for once, talk about doing the right thing too. But when cold, hard cash is on the line, nobody's going to do the right thing. They're going to maximize profits, which means that investment rates are going to fall while prices are going to rise. Bang, a whole lot of nothing is going to end up happening. There goes that whole new energy grid and system. You can already see that beginning to take shape in the slowing growth of renewables. Renewable energy growth should not be slowing down, at least in a sane country. It is in America because capitalism has no real incentive to provide it. Just like it has no real incentive to provide any other kind of public good that really benefits people, from healthcare to retirement to childcare. These things can only be provided by one party in the economy, at least at scale and well, and that's the government. Oh no, now I'm a communist, according to some large number of Americans, because I said the government should do something. own something, manage something. Newsflash, that's just common sense. Nobody else has the incentive to manage or own things at cost, provided as public services maintained for the common good. Nobody. And the government is just we, the people, remember? Only thanks to decades of hard right brainwashing, Americans seem to have forgotten that. Now, let's zoom out. What's the world's plan to climate catastrophe? Well, the answer is, again, there is no plan. There's a goal, sure. Let's all reduce our carbon emissions, but there's no plan. As in, country X, you do this to your energy grid, country Y, you do that. We all agree to invest this much, and each country gets this much because this is how we save our planet, the one we all live on. And because there's no plan, there's no agency to manage it. We live in the world America made, one in which plans and coordination and governance are bad things. Climate activists are fond of saying there's no plan B. I think the saying is there is no planet B, but the truth is much bleaker than that. There's not even a plan A. There is no plan, period. The world's approach to climate catastrophe is like America's: decentralized, individualistic, corporatized. We're hoping as a world that the invisible hand of the market is going to swoop down and pluck the carbon from the sky. You can see how absurd and extreme the folly of all this is in the latest version of this idea, which is championed by billionaires to literally begin blocking the sun. I imagine they'll own the companies that do that too. What could possibly go wrong? All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment so we can talk about a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is, he's talking about the government, stepping in and creating a plan. Now, I've become as cynical as anyone else about the government itself, but the idea of governance, right? The idea of politics, the idea of the people coming together and coordinating, coming to agreement, right? To accomplish things for the public good. That's a good idea, right? We've done a terrible job of it as a whole in the world, but that doesn't mean that the fundamental goal or idea of people coming together to manage our collective affairs collectively is a bad idea. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that before we get on to the other things Umair is talking about.
It's just a question on how you actually achieve that, because is there not things within the American government which have had votes on them, and the populations had like a 60% yeah do that vote, and the government said nah, it's too expensive, we can't be bothered, and just ignored them. It's not just the people power we need, it's people power to put people in power we need.
Well, yeah. I think what's fundamentally wrong about the way we do governance here in the United States and in most of the world is that we give a bunch of power to a small number of people, or they take that power, as in the case of dictatorships, and they mismanage. And it's really no big surprise, because a small number of people are going to be operating with a very small collective intelligence, right? I think that governance, not government, but governance should be something in which all people participate, right? Through real-time voting, through collective superintelligence, this network of conversations. So, but I'm just saying.
The point I was making is getting past actually doing something. You need to get enough people on board, and they wouldn't be able to, like, say, "Oh, just vote for the government we've got in place to do it." They'd have to do it themselves. You'd have to get them to unite their power as a sort of global corporation of we the people who have got enough money to just do it themselves.
Well, it's interesting. You said enough money to do it themselves. What if there were let's just call it a popular uprising of humanity all across the world, where humanity had a collective realization that, hey, we need a whole new form of governance, even if not a penny of money were invested in the uprising, but it was just people coming together and having conversations like the one that we're having right now, and memes developing and spreading along the lines of, my goodness, we need to do this, right? We need to do something, and we need to do it quickly. I'm just imagining a scenario. I'm imagining here, one scenario where it just becomes this massive popular movement that we need to radically transform governance, period. Right?
I get it that it's not money that we need. I mean, I often say, as an example, they talk about putting a rocket into space is costing billions. But if you got every single person on that project was a volunteer, how much does it cost now?
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't need to cost a penny. I mean, for the world to operate, I used to do these thought experiments, right? For the world to operate, even as it is, in its broken, dysfunctional ways that it could do everything that it's doing with no money, right? For a truck to be driving down the road, in theory, no money is required for that. Oh, but somebody had to provide the gasoline. Okay, well, when they built the oil refinery to make the gasoline, yes, a lot of money changed hands, but it didn't have to. They could have gotten together and with the same picks and the same shovels, done the same work of building the refinery. Oh, but the steel companies had to make money making the steel. No, they didn't. You could have simply gone to the iron mines in Minnesota with picks and shovels, gone to the coal mines in Pennsylvania with picks and shovels, extracted the raw materials and made the steel. Anyway, you get my point.
Yeah, I mean, I teach my kids that, but because they've got they're like really young, and they've got the game Minecraft. They've got to build the whole world for themselves. So they just got to go out there with their bare fists and punch the trees until they get some wood, and then use the wood to make an axe, and then chop down more trees with their axe, and then they get their resources and they build that up, and they learn what's most valuable and what they can do the most with, and where the most work and effort should be put. And it's a good learning process for life, although it does kind of get them addicted to playing the game.
Oh, now, did you say your kids play that game?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. I didn't even know you had kids, Alan. Wow.
The wee boy and the wee girl, well, 14 and 16 now.
14 and 16. Oh, wow. Super cool. Well, yeah, anyway, we're basically saying the same thing, that, you don't, I mean, yes, money has been used, but it didn't have to be, right? But anyway, that's getting a little bit off topic, because with or without money, what we're talking about is a form of governance. Now, as soon as I say with or without money, I catch myself as if to say, oh, well, that doesn't matter. I think it does. A lot of people believe money is kind of the root of a lot of our evils. And I would have to agree. The only thing is, we have not yet figured out another way of managing our affairs, right? and managing our resources other than through some monetary system, capitalism or otherwise. Um, but just because we haven't doesn't mean that we can't, right? And in fact, to that extent, I really see politics and economics as inseparable, because what is economics other than the governing of our resources, right? We're voting with our money, right? And voting with our time. But everything we do, we're voting with our feet or our hands or our money or our words, right? I'm voting right now for a new system just with my words and my time. Anyway, let me go on mute. I'm loving this conversation. So passing the talking.
An example of that, I suppose, is the fact when they make money equal to gold. So they've got the gold and diamonds. Apparently, the truth is that gold and diamonds wouldn't be nearly as expensive as they are. It's more due to the shortage of it, and there's not a shortage. There's too much of it, apparently. They sort of tried to create a shortage by, like for example, when Africa sort of said they were going to start using gold as actual gold coins in their currency, physical, literal gold coins. Was that Gaddafi or something? They killed them because it would have been more powerful than America.
Yeah. I don't know if it was Gaddafi, but regardless of the currency, we're using scarce currency as a proxy for scarce resources. Anyway, we could go deep on all that, and maybe we have to. And anyway, that's why we need collective super intelligence. We need roomfuls of people who are passionate about the topic of money, regardless of what direction they're coming from. But we need these roomfuls of people talking about this and sorting this out. On
last video that you showed, some of these decentralized platforms that are up and coming sound like brilliant ideas. Even just spreading the word about that and getting more people on board with these things, because decentralized corporations, basically, there's quite a few things that he listed there on the video that could be done through blockchain. Seems like it's happening anyway. Just kind of like letting people know and pointing people in that direction so it happens faster.
Yeah. Yep, like decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs. So yeah, more and more of the economy is shifting in that direction of decentralization. The question is it happening fast enough? And also, what is the motive? I mean, if the motivations are just individual hoarding, then we're going to have, the same problems, just with a different currency, right? And different organizational structures to perpetuate the same fundamental problems of individual hoarding of money, hoarding of power. So regardless of the currency, or even regardless of, blockchain or other technologies, decentralization, etc., we crucially need a radical revolution in both politics and economics, starting with what's the goal? Why are we here? Are we here to play this omnicidal game of individual hoarding for individual survival, right? Where we don't care about what is happening to other people or ecosystems or species or the planet as a whole. Anyway, passing the talking feather.
what we need is somebody who's capable of viral videos to get the message out and get the numbers.
Well, we need that. I mean, I think that fundamentally what we need more than anything else is collective superintelligence. And
That is the numbers.
but no, and that's yes, we do need numbers. We big time need numbers.
But to get the numbers, it's like one of the best ways I know is viral videos. I mean, that's only one option. There are other ways too. But what options have we got on the table? What's the fastest, bestest way? Has anybody already thought of it or tried it? Is it, things being tried that didn't work very well? That could be, we would not try that again, or is there? What kind of message reaches the most minds? What kind of angle of approach appeals to people across the board? These are the big questions.
Yeah, totally. And but what is the message that we want to get across regarding collective superintelligence?
I think myself, it's like anything else. If you want to get the numbers, then you have to show the numbers something that they're going to like, that they're going to, if you show someone something that they like, then they're willing to, want to know more or get included. So the message is vital, as you said, but what is the message? And one of those is governance. People in democratic countries, people still believe like that. Well, they believe we have democracy, but point is, what they don't really realize and what they need to be reminded of in order to bring back governance is that the people do have the power, because it's a democratic society. I know that they have politicians have sewn up to be, they cover each other's asses, and if somebody's, people want a certain person out of the government, their party will back them and all this. They have sewn up in such a way that it's not democracy. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, we believe we have a democracy, but we don't have a democracy because, basically, just look at the last fella there now in charge of America, right? We just say, I don't even want to name it, but we just say to the average fucking bird on the tree, what that man was coming out with out of his mouth, and what he was doing, and the things, the agreements and the treaties that he broke, the nuclear treaties, the climate treaties, everything that he was doing was completely and utterly fucking insane, right? And to the average person, it was fucking insane. And yet it's supposed to be the leader of a democratic country, but yet the people in the country who wanted him out still had to fight a 4-year battle because the members of his party, whom the people voted in anyway in the first place, backed him up to the hilt and still are. That's not democracy, because those people who are backing him up are just as equally insane as because they're backing him up. So if there was true democracy, then what should be available is that if the people that voted in, we say just a politician, right? He needs a certain amount of votes in his jurisdiction to get into government. And if the people vote for him and he gets in, if he starts to act a fucking idiot like the other fella was doing or whatever, and he starts doing things that are contrary to the people's good, then those that voted for him should be allowed to petition to have him fired. The actual people who gave him the votes should be able to have if there's controversy comes up and he's brought into this public spotlight and he's shown to have been doing something contrary to the people's good, then the people that voted him for him, it's all on paper, it's all there, their names are there. They should be able to just turn around and say, yeah, he's not good enough for the job, fire him. Because you wouldn't be getting politicians then who go and try and get into the business to make money and to make back fucking lane deals and everything else like that, and profit for themselves. and scratch each other's backs and look out for each other. It'd be a lot easier. It'd be a lot easier to control politicians if there was true democracy, but there isn't, and that's the message we need to let people know.
Absolutely
We're not
right, James. Absolutely right.
We're not living in a
We
democracy.
need the money-free party, which I've heard the rumor that they're changing their name to the Chrysalis Party. But yeah, that would be a good idea. That would be a good idea, James. Have a group of people voted in for the army of the people, a little sort of section of the army that doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to the people. If the government doesn't fulfill all the wishes of the promise when they were voted in, that army's there to remove them and set up the next vote for the next one to replace them. That People's Army, that's what you should call your party, Eric, the People's Army.
Speaking of which, welcome. Yeah.
No, I just said the People's Army, not the Chinese
Yeah. Well, welcome, Eric. Welcome back.
Hey.
Good to see you. We've been screen sharing and reading one of the latest articles from Umair Hake, and just to synthesize, he is bashing the United States government, the Biden administration, for not having a plan. And we're expanding from that concept to saying, look, forget about the United States for a moment. The world does not have a plan for cooling the planet, saving the biosphere, getting us out of this death spiral we're in. And so we're just exploring that. We're exploring transformation in governance, not necessarily government, but governance, and exploring even whole new paradigms of decentralized governance versus centralized government. And we also been exploring, to a degree, money, and money is potentially the root of many of our evils. I believe that politics and economics are inseparable, because money is really a form of governance. It's basically saying, okay, this is how resources are going to be distributed. We're all going to play this all-day Monopoly game where we each try to hoard as much of these tokens as we possibly can. And if you can chop down the last mahogany tree in the last rainforest and make some money, that's a good thing, according to the game. So we're fundamentally playing the wrong game of managing our...
Sorry to jump in, but it's not it. This is yeah. If you don't mind, because it's a really big problem, because it's not just a question of it's good for me to chop down this last mahogany tree because I'm going to make a few quid by doing it. But even if I think, you know what, I don't want to chop down the last mahogany tree. That would be really sad if the last mahogany tree ever was chopped down. Even if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, right? And so, you know, I gain nothing by not doing it. And the incentives are so yeah, and it's. The thing about politics, so James and Alan were both saying before, you know, we actually had some kind of like get out clause, right? When we elect bad people, we should have some way of getting rid of them before having to wait for the next election, right? But you know, whether it was Biden or Trump that won the last election, what actually happens day to day is going to be very little different, right? The politicians are no longer the ones that really pull the levers. And you know, direct the flow of capital and you know, societal interest and all of that kind of thing. They are no longer the ones doing it, and it's very dangerous, because the government is there to constrain the worst aspects of the market, right? You know, it's only because of legislation that, you know, children are not being, well, they still are, right, but they're not being like openly sold, you know, into prostitution and things like that, because there's money to be made there, right? And so the government has to curtail the worst forms of the market, but then we have to find the government, and we're not doing that. We can't do that. Our systems of voting once every 4 years for one of two choices which are pre-prepared and placed in front of us, you know what I mean, like the whole thing. So yeah, sorry, I'm starting to waffle on now, but all of this stuff that Jamie was talking about, the environmental challenges, the food challenges, the blah 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 blah, none of this changes, in my opinion, until the money system and the political systems change, right? Not long term. You can scratch the surface at it and maybe do a little bit here and a little bit there, but deep down, fundamentally, none of that changes until the money and politics systems change.
I totally
Yeah,
agree.
simple. I agree. Well, yeah, simple as that. And that's the message that we need, that the people need to hear, right? That they actually do have and hold the power, and that we could literally insist on certain rules being changed that the governments, as Eric just said there again, no, the governments have covered themselves and made rules to cover themselves so that they do ultimately get to stay their full duration of their 4 years and maybe another term afterwards as well if they're crafty little fuckers, like. But the point is, they have plenty of time to do their wheeling and dealing, and the people have no power to do anything about it except look on and give out about it. But giving out is waste of fucking time, like. It's so people need to know, like, that democracy is democracy, and if your fucking leaders aren't working for you, then fire the fuckers there and then on the spot. No confidence, out the door.
I mean, that does, of course, lead to its own problems, right? Like, who gets to decide whether or not they've lived up to their promises, right? I mean, you're creating another whole sort of field of arguments right now, and potentially like new governments in and out every few weeks. It's, do you know what I mean? Like that comes with its own problems. So yeah, I mean, was that Churchill quote? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others, right? Something like that. Like, it's really fucking hard turning the will of the people into an executive which actually carries out the will of the people and does not carry out its own will, right? And it's really, really, really hard. It's been tried, and it always falls into bureaucracy and corruption, top-heavy bureaucracy and corruption. I like every time. So there's something deep down in the incentive structure, deep down in the psychology, deep down. I mean, for me, voting, the very notion of voting, that's it. You're done. You've finished. You've lost already if you accept the notion of voting as arbitration of decision making, right? Because you only need to vote if you haven't arrived at a clear, obvious consensus. You wouldn't need to vote, right? If you've arrived at a clear, obvious consensus, you don't need to vote. You only need to vote when it's roughly 50-50, which means that every decision is now divisive. I mean, like, automatically, every decision is divisive when it's based on voting. The sociocracy thing, we talked about this a little bit a while ago, the idea of gaining consent rather than consensus, but consent, right? So that nobody has any serious objections. That's a really, really, really good starting point to try and aim for that kind of thing, rather than who gets the most, like, put up a proposition, argue about it, vote over it, where all you do is split the population. Every single time you do that, you split them down a different line.
Yeah, not only do you split them down a different line, but because of people's egos and attachment, if I've come out publicly and said, I believe A, and somebody else, and Eric says, I believe B, right? We've now made our positions somewhat intractable.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Given our egos and attachment. So voting becomes a mechanism for further division when what we really need is coming together and building consensus. So great points, Eric. Really,
well,
really
you just made another really good point as well. Like, along with, if you have a public voice, then along with your public voice comes an audience, right? And perhaps a living. Maybe you write books, maybe you give talks, maybe you do seminar tours, whatever, right? And so your opinions are now part of your livelihood, right? And so, it's even harder to change them or revise them. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so the whole structure is built up to create these like semi-permanent divisions, right? These divisions which become entrenched and hot and defended.
Yeah, and actually, and one thing that you've brought to us and are pioneering and developing is your own particular flavor of the glass beads game, which I really love because it seems to be something which helps dissolve that old bad paradigm. Because in that old bad paradigm, right, somebody with a big voice and a big personality and aggression and everything else ends up dominating the microphone. But with the glass beads game, by design, it's everyone gets a voice. And also by design, people are encouraged, and to the extent they really embrace it, it becomes a free flow where it's not my idea or your idea, but our process, our conversation. So hats off to you, Eric, for pioneering that. And this gets to a larger point that I want to make, which is that rather than try to confront, government and politics head on by, for example, creating a new political party and trying to get more votes, and essentially playing the same game. Einstein said we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So just coming at this with the same level of thinking, oh, well, we're just going to create a better political party and a better process and better laws and better voting and whatever else. I think that the answer is actually to come at it through the back door. So glass beads, collective superintelligence itself as a network of conversations is really coming at this through a whole new back door, a portal that may not even be visible, which basically says, look, let's just come together and commune and manifest this higher form of intelligence and let that higher form of intelligence figure it out. So don't feel like you need to come to the table with, hey, this is a great idea and let's just do this and everyone listen to me. No, that's playing the old game. Let's come together, resonate, and see where we go with it, playing new games like glass beads, passing the.
What is that back door? You said invisible, so I like to know what invisible things look like. What does it look like, that back door? How do we find that back door? How do we get in there?
Well, I think we're
hidden
there
maybe
now.
rather than invisible is maybe a better word, but yeah.
What does that collective intelligence look like without a voting system as well? I mean, you get 100 people on here, you could get collective intelligence of 100 people, but 100 people don't change the world. You probably, at least to make massive changes in the world, you probably have to get like a billion people. And then what do we do with them? We make them all volunteers, and then they all work for no money, and they all feed each other, and some farmers, some metal workers, and what does it actually look like, and where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you can really quickly get yourself tangled up, right? Because you're trying to map out a pathway through a complex system. You can't do that, right? All you can do, the very best you can do, is take the next step, right? That's the very best that you can ever do. And whatever next steps are available from that step will become apparent when you get there, sort of thing, and so yeah, to think more than one step ahead is often, I mean, that's our old linear complicated thinking, right? So if we do this, then that will happen, and then we're going to do this, 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 and then we write it all down and we tell everybody, right, this is what we're doing, and everybody goes ahead and does that, right? But that doesn't take account of all of the other complexities that exist in the world, and sooner or later those complicated systems start to break down in the face of the realities of the world, and they then have to be broken. And so rather than that, no clear written down absolute, this is how we do things, but this is the process by which we arrive at the decision of how to do things, right? That's the thing. And this is exactly that. And what you said, Alan, about needing a billion people, and yeah, you're right, of course, eventually you do need a billion people, not on one call, but you do need a billion people. But it starts with a dozen people, which becomes 20 people, which becomes 50 people, and then some of those splinter off and they start their own dozen people, which becomes 20 people, which becomes, and splinters off, and so on and so on and so on. And before you know it, you've got a billion people involved in it, right? But all in groups of 20, 30, 50.
Describing this back door, what does it actually look like, though? I mean, how do we build this back door? I mean, we're taking steps toward it. Obviously, you said that the only thing we can do is the first step. What is the first step?
Well, I mean, we took the first step, years ago when we first started getting on video conferencing and having these conversations. With COVID became a huge accelerator. I think COVID's done more for collective superintelligence than anything else in the history of collective intelligence. So we're on the path now. We don't quite know how to describe it, because we're in the middle of it. We're like these imaginal cells inside the chrysalis just starting to wake up and resonate with each other. None of us has a blueprint for the butterfly that's emerging here. And that's the key word, emergence. And so per what Eric said, I think we just need to focus on the next step. The next step is just stay in the conversation, right? As they say on the roller coasters, just keep the bar down and hang on, right? And keep showing up. I think the back door looks like this room, right? But per earlier comments, per Eric's comments, just exponentiated, right? So,
I mean, another obvious next step is to get this chrysalis calendar populated, right? And get more people into and using this room on a regular basis. And so, I mean, that's an obvious next step, not necessarily the next step, but an obvious next step.
Exactly.
I've reached out to the Zeitgeist movement to see if they want to do their bi-weekly meetings here. I haven't heard back from Mark yet, but I do know him. So and that could be a few meetings a month, potentially. I mean, they do it on Discord at the moment, which is not the most stable, but they may do it on Discord for a reason and not on Zoom. They may not want to do it on Zoom. So I no promises, but I've reached out and we'll see.
So there's two
very
steps.
Very good.
And there's two steps. One is inviting more people, and I'd really like Jamin's steps, slightly bigger step, but it is probably a first step to actually see a difference, is feed the world.
But those go in parallel, right? Because as we invite more people to this network of conversations, a certain percentage of those will gravitate towards the feeding people programs, and more people will get fed, right? And it's all mutually reinforcing, because then as more people get fed, they say, well, how did this come to be? Who can I thank for these meals? Well, thank the collective intelligence. And you can find out about them on the chrysalis calendar, et cetera, et cetera.
Did anyone step up and do anything about the website, Jamin? Or did they leave it
no,
for you?
No, not yet. And that's okay. But see, but the thing is, I did have a great conversation last week with Vincent Arena of Catalyst, and he said that this week, I think today actually, they're going to be relaunching the next iteration. So he asked me to hold off on sending out invitations to the Catalyst platform until this week. So I'm waiting to hear back from him on that. And
well, you should be presenting tonight at Kiko, I would imagine.
I would imagine, yeah. So I'll be at Kiko in an hour, and we'll check in there and see what's going on. But so we're letting that evolutionary path take its course, and we're being patient and persistent with that. And I think in parallel with that, with the technical side of the chrysalis calendar, one of the things we're talking about today is what meetings do we want to put on the calendar that will both attract people and also really get to the heart of what we need to co-create as a world. And I think that to use the chrysalis analogy, the more that we work on the blueprint for the emergent butterfly, the better, the more it will accelerate. And so one of the memes for today is decentralized central planning for the planet, AKA the blueprint for the butterfly, which is what we're talking about right now. So we're right on track, right? And, so how do we chunk this out into, its constituent meetings? Because ultimately the calendar itself will be divided up into meetings. And so in my email that I sent out last night, I wrote up a little list here. Some of the most important meetings and topics: solar radiation management, feeding everyone, collective superintelligence as a big hyper object, the chrysalis calendar as perhaps the crucial next step in developing and evolving collective superintelligence, D-Plan, Decentralized Central Planning for Our Planet, powered by collective superintelligence. Planetary governance, vital for such central planning for our planet. That's what we've been talking about here in the last half hour, planetary governance. And then another is kind of like the strategy for the coevolution of all of the above, right? We need some high level meetings that like we're having right now, frankly, right? Anyway, I'm just kind of throwing some stuff out there. You know, what do we need to put on the calendar? Because I think the more we can get right to the heart of the matter in our scheduling of meetings and topics on the calendar, I think the greater the attractive force will be, right? So yes, Chrysalis calendar, let's get the technicals worked out, but let's also work on what topics we want to populate the Chrysalis calendar with. Glass beads game, absolutely 2 thumbs up. Meetings on the Chrysalis calendar itself, however circular that is, 2 thumbs up. Solar radiation management, absolutely. Feeding everyone, absolutely. Planetary governance, absolutely. Right? Decentralized central planning. And I like to use that combination of words because it shows the inherent kind of yin-yang, even contradictory nature of it. Right now we think of central planning and we think, you know, the Soviet Union back in the 1960s and 70s, right? And colossal failures and all that. But what about decentralized central planning powered by this network of conversations? Anyway, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the food healers thing in Los Angeles. I mean, where is that actually at in terms of, you know, pulling it off, like doing the first whatever open cafe, you know, and having people on the streets in LA just rocking up going, fucking hell, really? Free food? Lovely, great, I love it. Where is it at? Where is it at?
Yeah,
if anywhere.
So where it's at, it's been on a slow but steady trajectory of evolution over the past several years, led by Ingrid, Sister Ivy, who's on here often. She was on here earlier. So she has an ongoing operation where she and a bunch of volunteers procure, prepare, and deliver food focused on houseless.
So they're already doing it. They are already actually doing it.
They're already doing it. Yeah. Now I'll flash an image on the screen. This on my window there, it says Community Cafe.
Yeah. I've seen that image. I've seen that image many times. Yeah.
Yeah. And we did that.
So what's the trajectory then? Is the idea to try and scale it up then? Is that basically the trajectory? What she's already doing and scaling it up? And so what are the limitations? I mean, first, how many meals per day, per week, whatever? How often is she doing it? How many meals is she providing at the moment? And what are the limitations to its expansion?
Yeah. So to get exact numbers, we'll ask her, but my understanding is she's doing it about 4 or 5 days per week, going to a small number of houseless camps. She has maybe 4 or 5 volunteer cooks. Sister Ivy herself goes to the farmers markets to get donated food. Like at the end of the day, the stuff they couldn't sell, they donate. She distributes it to the volunteers. They cook up the food. She and some other volunteers distribute that food. She needs more volunteers, and you know, she sets a pretty high bar for who she lets be a volunteer, especially for distributing the food, because they have to be, you know, certain qualifications and all that. And so part of the logic, Eric, is that through food healers and through our partnerships with, for example, Molly Baszler, who's running for Los Angeles City Council as a vegan animal rights activist, we're encouraging her to really step up and embrace, you know, Feed Los Angeles as a political platform. And so part of the logic is we bring in a lot of people first through conversation, right? Which is the obvious starting point for anything to happen, is through conversation. So invite more and more people into the conversation. Out of those, if you think of it kind of like a funnel, you know, say thousands of people show up to learn about it, hundreds then say, hey, I'd like to volunteer, and so on and so on. And we get more and more volunteers doing more and more of these feeding operations. And then the thing can grow virally. We get media coverage, do a press conference, etc. That's kind of the big idea, the general idea.
Okay, but in the meantime, what can we do to help? Because if you say that the main block is that she doesn't have enough volunteers, so if she had more volunteers, then she could do more meals. Is that basically what you're saying? Like, as things stand right now, if she had more volunteers, she could do more meals. So a sensible thing to focus on then, a small short-term goal. How do we drum up more volunteers for her in Los Angeles, obviously, right? Like, how might we go about doing that? And maybe even using this room to talk to, train, whatever volunteers that show an interest. And I was also wondering whether the people that she's delivering to, like the communities that she's delivering to, maybe she's already tried this, I don't know, but whether they might not be a source of volunteers. You know, any of you willing to, we want to expand this operation, or any of you willing to help out, you know, us do that? And I would have thought you'd have a pretty appreciative crowd there who would be, you know, quite loyal and committed volunteers to expanding the program, seeing as they themselves have seen the benefit of it, right?
Exactly. And in fact, she's done that to a degree. One thing that she's kind of faced is that a lot of these folks themselves are quite desperate and spend their time picking up aluminum cans or begging or whatever, trying to get by, right? Food, of course, is only one part of their existence, a crucial part, the most important part, but nonetheless one part. And so, you know, one of the things that we've explored is perhaps providing a small stipend, say $20, $30, per volunteer session of a few hours, helping out, some way that we can help them to volunteer. And but yeah, that's a very good idea, Eric, and one that we've she's been developing.
Well, ultimately, that is the answer. Like, you will have to give them an incentive. I mean, if some guy or lady has to go around and pick up aluminum cans to try all day long to try and get a couple of dollars at the end of the week for them, I'm sure she'd be quite willing to, you know, be trained in on how to serve out the food and help out the food when she's getting fed for free and getting a few dollars at the end of the day for helping out as well. It is your only way to go.
Is there a food healer's website with a donations button and a video advert saying this is what we're doing, here's where we're going, and please donate, and sort of crowdfunding and all these various things to get donations to make it happen?
Yeah, please donate, please volunteer.
Looking for volunteers and looking for donations and sort of set up.
I mean, I've no idea how it works in LA in terms of, you know, getting word out on the street to people, you know, like who's the Huggy Bear of the streets of LA? You know, how do you get the word out on the street in LA, like this is what we're doing and we want volunteers? How do you do? I've no idea. It's not my world. I don't know. You know, is there a publication of some kind, or a wall with notices or whatever? You know, is there what?
Yeah, because you could put out a notice there, like sponsor a volunteer. I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
No, a lot of wealthy people out there would get, you know, some sort of self-satisfaction themselves. You know,
yeah.
With it.
That's a really good idea. Sponsor a volunteer. Yeah. That's a really good idea.
I want to know how to do the whole thing from scratch. To, you know, start food healers for Edinburgh.
Well, in fact, there is a in fact, one of the most successful programs we know about is in the UK. I believe centered around London, and there's a gentleman, Hemant, who's been on a couple of programs that Dr. Silas Rao has led, where he was sharing with us his Love All, Feed All program. Anyway, that's an ongoing program. I think they're up to millions of meals that they've delivered. And so another vector for getting all this going is bringing together these different groups that are doing these feeding programs throughout the world, precisely so that we can share information, because I believe that answers to the questions that you're raising, Eric, that we're raising here, are out there, right? Answered by different groups. So if we can apply collective intelligence to this, we can share the best answers, the best practices, and grow all these programs simultaneously. It feels to me like this is, yeah, go ahead.
Can you tell me more about that one in Britain? Maybe a link to a website or somewhere I could contact them, or?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it while we're talking here.
One other thing that
Meanwhile,
occurs to
Eric,
me with this
yeah.
food healing thing is it sounds like at the moment most of these things are making meals and then delivering them to people that need them, right? And a nicer way, as listen, obviously there's going to be, won't always be possible, but a nicer way would be to have a, like, just a place where the meals are handed out, right? And a place for people to sit down and eat them together, right? Rather than, you know, delivering them to lonely people who are alone in their lonely homes. You know, actually get them out and meeting each other and mingling and eating on benches together, you know, that kind of thing would be nice if it could be done like that. That would be even better. And find a nice covered area and a mobile kitchen or something.
Well, the way it's kind of divided up here in Ireland, the way they do it is very much a community-based, parish-based kind of a thing. So each parish really, basically, the volunteers come from the parish. The volunteers do the collections within the parish, and the church does the collections as well, which the money goes specifically for the cause. Then you have, you'd have food parcels, then that would be done up out of that and delivered out. But then you also have penny dinners, restaurants, they're called. There's a penny dinners, it's called. It doesn't actually cost you a penny, but if you're houseless or anything else, you go there for your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and sit down with people that you know and everything else, and have your meal. And then
Perfect.
for the elderly and the infirm, then we have Meals on Wheels, and the volunteer community. Then each community looks after the infirmed and elderly in their community. And every morning a lunch, and every day a dinner is delivered to them. And you're also providing them then as well with company twice a day, and a little home help. So if it's broken down to a community basis, it doesn't have to be such an overwhelming job, really. Like, if it just needs to be broken down into parishes.
Yeah, I like that. Best of all worlds, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this goes back to what we were talking about distributed, non-centralized governance, right? Is things being handled at the right scale. Like doing Meals on Wheels for the whole country from one place. Well, that's impossible. You can't possibly understand what all the varying tiny little differences of need are. But the central thing ships it out to the parishes, and then the parishes do the bit from there to the final. That's governance at the appropriate scale, right? And the central thing has nothing to say to the parish about how they organize their business, right? That's up to them to deal with.
And on top of that, all of this is run outside of government. You know what I mean? This is all on voluntary basis and all paid for by the public. Nothing comes from the government. That's the truth.
Although I want to interject there, James, you're saying none of this is governance, but it is, listen to this, a new form of governance, right? Which is decentralized, run by the people, for the people. And I believe that
proper democracy. I mean, it is actual proper democracy, right? Without the voting, but it is actual participatory democracy, not representative democracy, participatory democracy.
Exactly. It's participatory democracy within your own community, on a community level and on a community scale. Therefore, the problem never gets overwhelming because you're only looking out for those within your own parish. The next parish
and also coordination between those small units in order to achieve sensible economies of scale, right? I mean, there are all sorts of things which, like tidal power generation, for example. You can't do that as a neighborhood, right? You have to get together and do that on a large scale, but then that can get distributed down to the scale of neighborhoods.
Exactly, yeah. They're obviously, like, it's broken down into parishes, but there are central, you would have St. Vincent de Paul would cover the food and the clothing and furniture and home housing for the elderly and infirmed and things like that. You also, you have the houseless then are looked after by another organisation. Like there is central organisations, but they're all still run on a voluntary scale. But they're just they would be just like leaders from each parish. Then would be involved in the overall and connecting and So it's very simple. It is very easily done. I mean, it's been done for years here in Ireland, because at the end of the day, we probably are under the already know that we're under an illusion of democracy, because we just said, fuck it, we'll just do it ourselves. You know what I mean? Because the government won't.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it becomes a new form of governance as well as a new form of economics, right? Because volunteer resources, these are very real resources, volunteer time, et cetera. And then also in terms of the coordination at larger scales beyond the parish or the specific neighborhood is, for example, the shared procurement of, say, truckloads of lentils, right? If you buy lentils from the grocery store, you're going to pay maybe a couple dollars per pound for dried lentils. If you buy them straight from the source, the farmer in Canada, by the 40-ton truckload, you're going to be paying less than 10 cents a pound, less than 5% the cost. You can imagine, collectively making these larger purchases and then distributing the lentils. Of course, there's some cost to that distribution, but you can imagine dropping off a half ton at a time in different locations, and having a huge cost savings, because you're cutting out the other form of economics, the monetary system, the capitalist, greed-driven, profit-driven system, which is very wasteful, et cetera. So we're really talking about pioneering new forms of governance and economics here, starting with the most basic, which is food. The most basic human need is food and water, period, followed closely by shelter, healthcare, community, et cetera. So it's all very interconnected. So anyway, passing the talking feather.
Simon not been by this evening?
No, I got an email from him late last night that he had some. Here, I'll pause. One.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, everyone gets gouged, don't they? The lentils example you gave, the farmer in Canada is only getting 10 cents a pound for their lentils, right? Because they've got a fuck ton of lentils and they have to get rid of them all at once. And then, as you say, at the supermarket, by the time they end up in the little £1 bags, they're $2 or $3 a bag, right? And I don't know how many steps they go on in between those two, but every single step, there's someone there taking their cut, right? Doing their little bit. They take a big lot, they divide it up into smaller lots and pass it on to the next step in the chain. Basically, that's all they do, right? They take a big lot, cut it up into smaller lots, pass it on to them. They take that lot, cut it up into even smaller lots and pass it on, and so on. The whole thing is ridiculous. There's a whole bunch of bullshit jobs, people taking their cut, and the people that get gouged are the farmer and the final purchaser, right? Well, I suppose everyone in their way gets gouged, but the two people that actually matter, the people that produce the lentils and the people that eat the lentils, they are the ones that get most seriously gouged at both ends of the chain.
Exactly, and along the way, you're adding plastic, cardboard,
Absolutely.
Labels, tape,
Petrol,
fuel.
Yeah.
And not to mention, very critically, the supermarket itself is this enormously inefficient, air-conditioned, expensive operation, right? Designed so that somebody with an SUV can pull up and get what they want when they want it, all packaged up in plastic and everything else, aluminum, whatever, so that they can then go home and cook it and heat up a whole big oven to cook up a small batch. The whole thing is vastly more efficient if done at scale in the community cafe model. And here's Ingrid. who's coming back in. She had to step out for a bit. So we're talking about creating a whole new model, which is vastly more efficient and gets rid of all the gouging and just goes straight from farm to local community kitchens to produce at scale without any packaging, right? Sister Ivy, welcome back. We were talking about you and your We Are Uno program in Los Angeles, and there were some questions, which hopefully you can
hello.
answer. Yeah.
In some moments, if it's okay, not right now, but I can listen.
Oh yeah,
Okay?
no problem. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, of course. No,
Yeah.
no pressure, never any pressure.
Okay.
And we are recording. We've been recording for the last, I don't know, hour and a half or so.
Thank you for the good work.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Sister Ivy, for the good work. You are an inspiration and a model to us all, and something that we want to support and help you expand. And so, yeah, Sister Ivy's been doing this for over a decade, very consistently there in Los Angeles. Yeah, so we're talking about this whole new model. It feels to me like this is both the revolution and the back door as we get this going and these different groups connect and we learn from each other and can coordinate with each other, both for collective purchasing, buying the truckloads of lentils together, for example, or in the case of Sister Ivy, organizing to make sure that the food which would otherwise go to waste at these farmers markets, what they can't sell at the end of the day, collecting it and taking it to the volunteer chefs who cook the food in their own homes, in their own home kitchens, right? So it is just such a beautiful thing. And here we are creating the virtual brain, the planetary virtual brain. Yes, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, another question has just occurred to me. You might be able to answer it, Jamin. Otherwise, Sister Ivy, when she's ready, maybe she can answer it. But I would imagine, in fact, I'm certain that it would be the case in the UK. You couldn't just start up something like this, like go and pick up food from farmers markets, bring it around to some people's houses, they cook up stuff, you bring it around, drop it off at other people's houses. You wouldn't be able to do any of that without permits and licenses and blah, 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 food safety certificates and all of this kind of bullshit from the local councils. Is that also the case in LA, or can you just crack on and do it?
You can crack on and do it, because in the United States, most states have what are called Good Samaritan laws. And it was precisely for the reasons that you articulated. Hey, we want to feed hungry people. Why the hell are you getting in the way with all this red tape and everything else? The Good Samaritan laws basically say, listen, if you're doing something with good intent to help people, no one will sue you, including the government,
right?
Or the people who you're feeding.
That's a good law.
If they happen.
That's a good law. I like that. So it cuts through all the bullshit. So if you, so if you're just doing this out of your own pocket, out of your own time, for nothing else than to help people, then you don't have to do all this bullshit. That's really good. That's good. That's an excellent law. I suppose it could be gamed, and I suppose there are corporations that have tried to game that law for their own ends, right? But nevertheless, it's a good idea.
Yeah, probably not so much corporations, because it's for really donations of stuff, and corporations don't get by donating stuff.
No, but they can try and pretend they're doing something charitable, right? And use the Good Samaritans Act to get to avoid some local. Anyway, whatever. I'm just saying, I suspect there's probably ways it could be gained, but that's by the by.
Possibly. One of the ways that's not a gaming way that does protect corporations. So if you're a supermarket and you've got food that might be on the verge of, passing its shelf life, you can donate it, but now without fear that someone's going to come back and sue you because they ate your food that was donated, it went bad along the way, whatever, so you're protected. So it's really about protection.
Yeah, so again, in England, the supermarkets are not allowed to give away their food if it's past date. They are not allowed to give it. It's just fucking crazy. Better to let people starve than give them food that might possibly, maybe, unlikely, but maybe give them a little bit of a tummy bug. You know what I mean? Like, really? Oh God.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, because the reality is there's a window, right? I mean, my
Of
mother-in-law
course
doesn't
there
like
is.
to
Yeah,
eat.
yeah,
There's a winner. My mother-in-law doesn't like to eat yogurt that's past the expiration date. We all know that yogurt is,
good
of
for
course, it's
months.
going to last
Months. Yeah, yeah,
months.
yeah. Yeah, I eat yogurt like seriously months past its date, and it's absolutely fine. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Sorry, with tins, you just rip the label off and donate it to the food bank.
Yeah, I ate some peaches the other day. 2019, they were supposed to go off. Tin of peaches. 2019 was the date on the can. They were absolutely fine.
Oh, I've eaten
Didn't
canned
find
stuff that
a
was
tin of
literally a
beans.
decade.
Didn't they find a tin of beans that have been lost for 100 years? And they opened the tin and ate the beans.
Yeah, canning is a pretty good preserving method. It really is pretty good, pretty effective. So long as the doesn't get damaged on the inside, right? If it gets dented and the metal is exposed, then that tarnishes it. But otherwise, the can is in good nick. 100 years, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? That's pretty impressive, especially for like soggy wet food like beans.
Well, they said they found a mammoth in Russia and the meat was edible and they tried that as well. Apparently, that's 5,000 years. So,
Yeah, frozen solid though, right? So yeah, no, you could, yeah, yeah, still.
Yeah, I seen a guy on YouTube as well. One of these guys who preppers, they prep for all these disasters and everything else. But one guy, he dug up a couple of containers of food that he'd buried. It was from the 1970s, and he even had microwave popcorn. There was such a thing in America. I didn't think there was, no, at the time, but apparently there was in America anyway. But literally, there was one or two packets, all right, no, where you could see where the oil or the butter seeped a little, so he didn't use those, but the rest of them, perfect. All the food, perfect. The tins, the rice, 60 years old or something like that, like, you know what I mean? Perfect. Over here in Ireland, Aldi have shown up the other supermarkets, and because of the pressure of it, then the other supermarkets are starting to go on board with it now as well. So at the end of business day, now what Aldi done here was they bought a fleet of refrigerated trucks, and at the end of the day, all the fresh produce that's still left on the shelves is put into refrigerated trucks and is driven around to the exact business or the premises that I was on about now, to the community kitchens, the penny dinners crowd, to St. Vincent de Paul and what have you, and to Simon Community or whatever. But the food is given out at the end of the day to these different organizations, rather than have it thrown out and gone spoiled. And anything that's coming up to out of date, like tin foods or whatever, they'd also donate that as well, rather than have it just go past its date and thrown away. I can't see why any other business should do the same thing as well.
Mm. Yeah, was it 40%?
I'd like to share.
Of our food?
I'd
Yeah,
like
go
to
ahead.
share an idea. I thought maybe we could give the support to Sister Ivy to create the chrysalis hummus. Chrysalis hummus, we could sell it in the region, and we could use the profits to feed more people.
The only thing about the brand Chrysalis hummus is I would wonder if, as a consumer, if somebody took some caterpillars and threw it in there.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That doesn't sound very appetizing.
Yeah, caterpillar shit hummus. I don't know.
that's just the brand name, though. You get like brand names like Red Tiger. It doesn't mean there's a red tiger in it.
No, it's true, but nevertheless, it still feels like it still feels as though there might be crushed caterpillars in it.
Yep. We should call it pupa, because the chrysalis is called the pupa. The more generally, it's the pupa. So pupa poop.
Pupa hummus, that's even worse. That's even worse. That's
Pupa hummus, pupa.
Yeah, no, that's even worse.
There's hummus.
But I mean, chrysalis hummus could work if and when the chrysalis brand is established as its own thing. Then chrysalis hummus can work potentially.
Yeah, but the concept is like Newman's Own, Paul
Yeah,
Newman
exactly,
and his family, they
exactly.
created that Newman's Own brand. It's kind of that nonprofit thing I'm going at. I think that's a great idea. We could work toward that down the line.
Yeah, I mean, nobody thought with Newman's Own that there was, bits of his piss or sperm or whatever in there, did they?
Thank you.
At least not until now.
Thank you, Eric, for introducing that. I'm sure Paul Newman is
Maybe there
turning
is
over in his.
a little tiny drop of his piss or his sperm or his blood or something in every bottle. There's a little tiny drop of Paul Newman, maybe.
Mm. Thank you.
Well,
Maybe.
Thank you.
if it said made in China, if it said made in China on the can, you'd probably think about it, all right?
No, but Newman's Own, I mean, what a great example. All profits to charity, right? He pioneered that concept, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, except here it's all profits go to feeding people. In his case, it's just charity generally. So they have, a part of they have their foundation that just writes checks to myriad different charities. But I think it's more powerful to have all profits going to feeding everyone, to ending hunger.
Yeah, it's like I
etc.
bought a jar of sauerkraut from a farm. Is like $10 for one jar of sauerkraut. We could buy the cabbage and chop it up and create our own sauerkraut, the chrysalis sauerkraut.
Yeah, and that's the idea
It looks
behind.
like worms. Sorry, go on.
Oh goodness. Yeah, we're gonna have to navigate those waters carefully. But that's the whole idea of the triple C, certified compassionate companies standard that we've pioneered on radishes, precisely to do exactly what I said, create a standard, certified compassionate, which means that whatever your product is, whatever your brand is, if you're certified compassionate, it means that you're donating 100% of your profits to ending hunger. Because precisely one of the limitations of the Newman's Own brand is by putting his brand on so many different categories of products, he's diluting the power of the brand. It was arguably most powerful when it was just salad dressing, right? And then they expanded to lemonade and cookies and spaghetti sauce and pizzas and so many different things. And so it dilutes the power of the brand, right? So the idea of creating a standard, certified compassionate, is let there be thousands of brands that all are under that same standard, but then each brand can focus. One on salad dressing, one on spaghetti sauce, one on lemonade, et cetera, et cetera. But just like certified organic, there are millions of brands under, I don't know, millions, but there's lots of brands that are certified organic, each of which has its own focus. Anyway, that's the idea of certified compassionate. Triple C, certified compassionate companies. Now, what's fascinating here is we're basically working on solving multiple problems simultaneously, launching multiple things simultaneously. And among them is the collective superintelligence to manage all these things simultaneously. So we're moving towards critical mass here. And I think we're getting there. I think we just have to be patient and persistent and keep at it. And while we're working on the chrysalis calendar, we're also working on the bigger picture of the architecture of collective superintelligence. We're working on solar radiation management to cool the planet, working on food healers and We Are Uno to feed people, working on triple C, the triple C economy to fund it all, and so on and so on and so on. Even political campaigns like Los Angeles City Council, Molly Baszler for City Council. So I'm just taking a moment to acknowledge ourselves that we're taking on a lot here, right? Precisely because to transform the world, we need to do it holistically. And we are daring to step out and say, okay, let's take on the whole of this as humanity. as a distributed collective, a collective superintelligence. And let's simultaneously pioneer new forms of governance, economics, feeding people, cooling the planet, talking with each other, playing games like glass beads, etc. Creating a new calendar where you can find all these different conversations. So hats off to us all for taking this on.
Just thinking before when you were talking, Joan, about things like certified organic. Are you familiar with a brand called Whole Foods, the US brand? I think they were pretty big for a while. I think they're even bigger
Oh,
now.
they're huge. The whole
Yeah.
It's a supermarket chain.
Now the guy that started Whole Foods, I don't know all the details of this story. I only know snippets of it because I heard it secondhand. But the guy that started Whole Foods was apparently like a really dedicated eco warrior type, you know, and you would not find a guy more unwilling to compromise on his principles than him. And yet, exposure to success and the pressures of the market and blah, 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 he got ousted and taken over, and it's now this just big corporate thing, you know, it's lost entirely touch with its, you know, original mission. And so, you know, if Triple C, for example, becomes successful and taken up widely, then, you know, the Nabiscos and the Nestle's and so on of this world are going to want a Triple C rating for their corporations, and they will do their level best to game it and co-opt it and turn it into something that it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, it's hard to resist those forces. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I'm just saying it's hard to resist those forces. Very good people have been swept away by them.
Yeah, no.
Do you happen to know what the guy's name was that started Whole Foods? Do you happen to know who I'm talking about? Do you happen to remember the guy's name? Anyone? No? I'll look it up.
Yeah, but what a tragic story, because Whole Foods is, you know, one of its nicknames in the United States is whole paycheck.
Yeah.
Because you can easily blow your whole paycheck. Whole Foods Market, whole paycheck. You can blow your whole paycheck there because it's so bloody expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Highly packaged, highly branded stuff, highly marked up, et cetera, et cetera. It's really become the supermarket for the rich in the United States.
John Mackey, that's it. John Mackey is the guy's name.
Can we pause recording for a second?
Yep, pausing now.